The world's tallest building is finally under threat. And this time, it's not some futuristic concept hiding in a glossy render. It's real, and it's under construction right now. Plus, it's already past 100 floors. For years, Jeddah Tower looked like another megaproject that was never going to happen. Construction stopped. Deadlines came and went. The tower sat unfinished for so long that a lot of people quietly stopped talking about it. I mean, when a project spends years frozen in place, most people assume the story is over. But then, something changed. Work restarted. The cranes came back. New floors started appearing. And suddenly, a project that looked dead is now the only building on Earth with a realistic chance of taking Burj Khalifa's crown. That's a big deal, because Burj Khalifa has been the world's tallest building for more than 16 years. Entire skyscrapers have been planned, redesigned, delayed, canceled, and forgotten during that time. The record Enmer moved. Now, for the first time in years, it actually might. So how did Jeddah Tower go from a stalled construction site in the Saudi desert to the biggest threat Burj Khalifa has ever faced? And more importantly, can they really finish a skyscraper that's supposed to break the 1 kilometer barrier? Well, to understand why Jeddah Tower matters so much, you first have to understand what it's up against. Back on January 4th, 2010, Dubai unveiled a new world record, the Burj Khalifa. At the time, the tower looked almost unreal. 828 meters tall, more than 160 occupied floors, and so far above every other skyscraper on Earth that it didn't just break the previous record. It completely rewrote it. The building that held the title before was Taipei 101 in Taiwan. Burj Khalifa beat it by more than 300. That's like adding another skyscraper on top of a skyscraper. And most of you won't know, but the tower almost had a different name. For most of its construction, it was known as Burj Dubai. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit. Dubai's economy took a serious blow. Projects across the city started running into trouble. Even Burj Dubai wasn't immune. Financial support from Abu Dhabi helped Dubai get through the crisis, and during the opening ceremony, the tower was renamed Burj Khalifa in honor of Sheikh Khalifa bin Zayed Al Nahyan. Just like that, Burj Dubai became Burj Khalifa. Underneath all the glass and celebrations was some seriously ambitious engineering, a massive Y-shaped design, a reinforced concrete core, concrete pumped higher than anyone had ever managed before. Elevators traveling distances that sounded almost ridiculous at the time. Everything about the project was pushing limits, but what really made Burj Khalifa special wasn't the height. It was what happened afterward. The tower became the symbol of Dubai. Tourists came from all over the world to see it. Developers used it as a benchmark. Cities started dreaming bigger. And for the next 16 years, nobody could take the crown away from it. Plenty of projects talked about becoming the next world's tallest building. Burj Khalifa was the one that actually got built. But eventually, somebody decided to try, and interestingly enough, the challenge came from right next door. Just over a year after Burj Khalifa opened, Saudi Arabia also unveiled plans for a new record breaker. Back then, it was called Kingdom Tower. Today, we know it as Jeddah Tower. At first glance, the goal sounded pretty simple. Build a taller skyscraper, but that wasn't really the plan. Saudi Arabia wasn't aiming for 850 meters or 900 meters. The target was much bigger than that. 1 kilometer. A height no building in human history had ever reached before. And to make things even more interesting, they turned to a familiar name, Adrian Smith, the same architect who helped design Burj Khalifa. This time, the assignment was even more ambitious. Take everything learned from the world's tallest building and push it further, much further. The proposed height would exceed 1,000 meters, roughly 180 meters taller than Burj Khalifa. To put that into perspective, that's almost the height of an entire second skyscraper added on top. The tower wasn't supposed to stand alone either. It would become the centerpiece of Jeddah Economic City, a huge new development planned along the Red Sea coast. In other words, Saudi Arabia wasn't just building a tower. It was trying to build its own global landmark, a structure people would instantly recognize anywhere in the world. And for a while, it looked like everything was going according to plan. Then the delays started. Construction officially began in 2013, and at first, the project looked exactly like what you'd expect from a future world record holder. Before the tower could rise even a single floor, engineers had to solve a problem sitting beneath their feet. The site was located near the Red Sea, where the ground conditions were far more complicated than they appeared. Soft layers, coral formations, underground cavities. Not exactly the kind of place where you'd normally build the tallest structure on Earth. The solution was massive. Around 270 reinforced concrete piles were drilled deep into the ground, some reaching more than 100 meters below the surface. Those piles were tied together by a giant concrete raft foundation stretching roughly 90 meters across. And that was just the beginning. By the time the tower is completed, it is expected to contain around 500,000 cubic meters of concrete and roughly 80,000 tons of steel. Think about that for a second. You're practically building a small mountain out of concrete and steel. Once the foundations were finished, the tower finally started climbing. And for a while, everything looked promising. The structure kept rising above the desert, floor after floor, year after year. By early 2018, Jedha Tower had reached around the 63rd floor and stood more than 250 meters tall. At that point, nobody was talking about whether the tower would be built. The conversation had shifted to how tall it would ultimately become. Then, everything changed. Work slowed down, then it stopped completely. Behind the scenes, several problems were arriving at exactly the wrong time. Saudi Arabia's anti-corruption crackdown pulled several high-profile figures connected to the project into a wider investigation. Questions started appearing around contractors, financing, and the future direction of the development. Before those issues could settle, another challenge arrived: COVID. And suddenly, a project that was supposed to become the first kilometer-tall building in human history wasn't moving at all. The unfinished concrete core remained frozen at roughly the same height, a little over 250 meters above the desert. And the longer that silence lasted, the easier it became to believe the project would never recover. Many people simply wrote it off. Burj Khalifa's record looked safe again, because the only challenger that had ever looked genuinely dangerous had stopped climbing. Then, after years of uncertainty, something unexpected happened. The project came back to life. Saudis started issuing new contracts. Fresh tenders were released. New construction agreements were signed. A new project management team was brought in to help push the tower toward completion. And in early 2025, construction officially restarted. At first, progress was fairly cautious, which makes sense. After sitting still for years, nobody was expecting the tower to suddenly start racing toward the clouds. But little by little, activity returned to the site. New equipment arrived. Additional cranes were installed. Workers returned. And most importantly, new floors started appearing again. By the beginning of 2026, construction had already pushed past the 80th floor. A few months later, another milestone arrived: 100 floors, and honestly, that's the moment when a lot of people started paying attention again. Because reaching 100 floors means you're no longer talking about a stalled megaproject from the last decade. You're looking at a structure that is actively moving toward completion. As of mid-2026, Construction has surpassed the 103rd floor and continues to rise. The goal remains the same as it was from the very beginning, more than 1,000 meters tall, the first kilometer-high building in human history. The current target points toward completion around 2028. Of course, there is still a lot of work left. Hundreds of meters, complex building systems, elevators, mechanical floors, the spire. None of that is easy. But for the first time in years, those challenges feel real again. And that's where things get really interesting, because getting a tower to 250 meters is one challenge. Getting it to 500 meters is another. A kilometer is a completely different game. At that height, almost every problem gets worse. The ground, the wind, the elevators, even the weight of the building itself. And remember, Jeddah Tower isn't being built in the middle of solid bedrock. The site sits close to the Red Sea. Engineers had to deal with coral formations, underground cavities, and saltwater conditions that can create long-term durability problems if they aren't handled properly. That's one reason the foundation ended up being so enormous in the first place. Then there's the building itself. Once completed, Jedha Tower is expected to weigh well over 900,000 tons. That's a staggering amount of weight, concentrated onto a relatively small footprint. Also, there was one more interesting challenge, something most people will never think about: the elevators. In a normal skyscraper, you use steel cables. But the problem is that as buildings get taller, those cables get heavier. Eventually, they become so heavy that they start creating problems of their own. Burj Khalifa was already pushing close to those practical limits. Jedha Tower goes beyond them. That's why the project relies on Cone's ultra-rope technology, a carbon fiber hoisting system that's much lighter than traditional steel cables. Without something like that, moving people efficiently through a building this tall becomes incredibly difficult. The tower is also expected to feature the highest observation deck in the world, which sounds amazing until you realize nobody has ever operated a public observation space at this kind of height before. And that's really what makes Jedha Tower different. The project isn't trying to improve an existing record by a few meters. It's pushing into territory where there isn't much real-world experience to learn from. A lot of what happens over the next few years will be testing limits that have never been tested before. And Jedha Tower isn't just competing against Burj Khalifa. It's competing against every challenge that comes with building something the world has never seen before. Of course, this isn't the first time a country has chased the world's tallest building title. The Empire State Building did it. The Petronas Towers did it. Taipei 101 did it. Then Burj Khalifa raised the bar higher than anyone thought possible. And that's usually how these projects work. The height gets all the attention. But the real goal is what comes after. Tourism, investment, global recognition. A building becomes a landmark long before most people ever visit it. Just look at Burj Khalifa. Today, it's impossible to separate the tower from Dubai itself. The building became part of the city's identity. You see a photo of that skyline and you instantly know where it is. Saudi Arabia is hoping Jedha Tower can have a similar effect, not just as a record-breaking skyscraper, as a symbol, a statement that the kingdom intends to be part of the next generation of global megaprojects, which brings us back to the race itself. As things stand in 2026, Burj Khalifa is still the champion, 828 meters tall, completed in 2010. Still, the summiest building on Earth, after more than 16 years. Jedha Tower is the challenger. Construction is active. The tower has already pushed beyond 100 floors. The target remains more than 1,000 meters. And if everything stays on schedule, completion is currently expected around 2028. That's still a big if. A lot can happen between now and then. Major projects have a habit of surprising people, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad ones. But one thing is clear. For the first time in years, this race feels real again. Burj Khalifa still holds the title. Nobody is arguing that. The difference is that now, there is finally a challenger moving toward the finish line. And that's what makes the next few years so interesting. If Jeddah Tower reaches its full height, Burj Khalifa's reign as the world's tallest building comes to an end. If new delays appear, Dubai keeps the crown. Right now, nobody knows which outcome we'll get. But after years of silence, the race is finally back on. So what do you think? Will Jeddah Tower actually become the first kilometer-tall skyscraper in human history? Or will Burj Khalifa still be sitting at the top 10 years from now? Let us know down in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe for more of the world's biggest and most ambitious construction projects.